yourself a cold one.
They strike 'em, huh?
And listen to Ross Tucker break down the top college prospects on another tasty edition of The College Draft.
It's Daddy Soda time here on the College Draft Podcast, presented, of course, as always, by DraftKings. I'm Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman, 5 teams, 7 years. You know that. Hopefully a lot of you check me out on social media at Ross Tucker NFL. Actually recording this Monday with my guy, Emory Hunt, from a hotel in Kansas City. The hotel does not have the greatest internet I've ever been around, the greatest Wi-Fi, so hopefully we won't have any issues on this show. We've tried everything we can to make the quality as good as we possibly can for you guys today. I can assure you of that. I'm at Ross Tucker NFL. We are at Ross Tucker Pod, and love those of you that engage or repost on any platform, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. It means a lot. I'm in Kansas City because I'll be on the call tonight with Kevin Harlan for Westwood One of the Saints and the Chiefs national radio. Looking forward to that. A lot of guys we've talked about over the years here on the College Draft Podcast will be playing tonight. In particular, the Chiefs have just done a terrific job of drafting. The star of this show is Emory Hunt. Huge fan of his on so many levels. Nobody, and I mean nobody, knows as much about FCS and below. I think I would even put in there group of 5 and below. You got to check out some of the stuff Emory posts on social media with his group of 5 players of the week, his FCS player, all those things. He does the rankings. They have this guy do the rankings for the lower levels because he follows it that closely. He's at F-Ball Game Plan on Twitter. He's Football Game Plan on YouTube, which is where he really got his start. We're, by the way, on YouTube. For those of you who want to check us out, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. Every once in a while, we like this show so much, we're so proud of it that we'll put it on some of the other feeds, whether it's the Even Money feed or the Ross Tucker Football Podcast feed, just to make sure it gets a little bit more exposure as it deserves. Just like you should get more exposure for the draft guide. footballgameplan.com/2025 draft guide. It is never, I repeat, never too early to sign up for Emory's draft guide, where you get scouting reports on basically anybody and everybody that could possibly get drafted. It's pretty awesome. Not even drafted, even possibly get signed as free agents. I'm a huge, huge fan of it. Just like I'm a huge, huge fan in general of college football. Emory, what a weekend. We might talk about it more a little bit later, but I'm sitting here, okay? First of all, I get to this hotel, right, in Kansas City. I do Navy Air Force. Then I come here and get to the hotel, and at the hotel, I watch Vandy beat Alabama and storm the field. I see Minnesota beat USC and storm the field. Arkansas beat Tennessee and storm the field. Washington beat Michigan, storm the field. I'm not so sure about that one, Washington beating Michigan, but I get it. They beat them in the national championship game, so it was like a revenge thing, and they were still the underdogs, so I get it. But anyway, that is what we love about college football, is just the emotion, the energy. There's just something with them being 18 to 23-year-olds that you just can't replicate at the professional level.
Right. And, I did the Delaware Monmouth game. People may not know, I call games too. So I did that Delaware Monmouth game Saturday, and it was Delaware's first and last trip to the Jersey Shore. Because remember, they're moving up to FBS next year. And so they're undefeated. They can't even be ranked in the top 25 of the FCS. So it's a unique experience to see the team in transition and how they go about playing against the FCS opponent. And Monmouth was coming in off of a great win the week before. Then, two wins in a row. They knocked off FIU, their first FBS win in program history. So there was a lot riding on this game, and that game went down to the wire to where Monmouth looked like they had the game won in the end. But once again, on par with the week, college football was just crazy, and Delaware marched right down the field and got the game-winning point. So thinking about all these upsets that we saw and how you really can't, just when you think you really don't have an idea how emotions play into things. You talked about 18 to 20-year-olds, 23-year-olds. I guess you could stretch it out to 18 to 35-year-olds with the way these guys are hanging around college football. But it also, what I took away from the weekend was just how it kind of, last weekend kind of made the point that I've always made about more teams being in the postseason and teams having a legit puncher's chance. And I'm saying all that to say, you called that Navy game. Look at how Navy dominated Air Force. Then you look across the way and see how Army dominated Tulsa. You mean to tell me in a one-game situation with everything on the line, Army or Navy couldn't give someone from a group of five or a power five, a power four conference the blues and upset them? That's the part I really want people to understand, is that just because you are in that power four conference doesn't mean you're invincible. And it's unfortunate because we saw with the AP Top 25 how they chose to rank these teams that, like, Bama fell from 1 to 8 after losing to an unranked Vandy. And then you saw A&M, they beat Missouri. Now, granted, Missouri was 9th, and whatever you thought about Missouri being 9th, A&M was 25th. They beat them. Now they jump up to 15, or in some polls 12. But you rarely see SMU ranked, or Navy or Army not even in the top 25. Pitt is barely in the top 25. And so I wish it was just about how these teams are playing on the field, how they look, because as we saw last weekend, anything can happen in college football.
Let's look at, Emory, how you did last week. We might get back to that topic a little bit later, but how you did last week. You were 1-3 with your bets last week. So you went from 13-11 on the season to 14-14. It's really interesting, Emory, because you laid the 20.5 with Ohio State. And I thought, oh man, I wouldn't do that. Iowa's defense is way too good. It's 7-0 in the third quarter. And I'm thinking, oh boy, Emory. Then Ohio State just kept chipping away, and they finally broke through, and they won 35-7. So you laying the 20.5 points with the Buckeyes was a hit. Kind of what you predicted last week, that Ohio State, it would be tough sledding for a while, but they would eventually break through. I got to say, while we're on this, that Randy Moss was unbelievable at Marshall. I don't know if we consider that his freshman year or not, because he had been at Florida State the year prior, but he was ridiculous as a freshman at Marshall playing FCS football, 1AA back then. But these two receivers, Emory, Ryan Williams and Jeremiah Smith, I can't recall, and I'm sure there's somebody else recently that's been really good, but these might be the two best true freshman receivers I can ever remember.
Yeah, listen, especially at that position. We've seen it at running back, countless times over, where the freshman comes in and plays, absurdly well. But you rarely see it at receiver. And I think that's where this has become shocking. I put out a tweet this weekend and really didn't process it until after I hit send. But it was like, man, because it was more about Travis Hunter than it was about the two receivers. I was like, man, if we weren't getting great play from Ryan Williams and Jeremiah Smith, Travis Hunter could easily be in play for both the Jim Thorpe and Biletnikoff Award, and not realize, like, man, how great these two true freshmen have been playing, to where they are clearly the best two receivers in the country. Like, that is insane to think about. And both, again, you saw the one-hand catch Smith made in the Ohio State game, and just the way Ryan Williams was able to stay in bounds on the sideline and contort his body to make that catch to shield the defender from the football, then accelerate once he hit the ground to score. It's just insane. I have never seen two receivers that are true freshmen come in and dominate like these dudes are dominating.
You're right. It's not just that they're good. The Jeremiah Smith one-handed catch thing is absurd, and the Ryan Williams weird body movement thing is absurd. Like every game, he does something where it's like he's a deer. He lands and then go. It is really, really fun to watch, and we'll have a conversation this offseason because I'm glad those guys get paid now. There's no way those guys should have to wait 2 more years to be able to play in the NFL, but that's a conversation for another day. The ones you missed on, Emory, you liked Missouri getting a point on the road. I didn't catch much of that game. They got hammered by A&M. What happened there, Emory?
Dominated up front on both sides of the line of scrimmage. They couldn't stop the run. They couldn't get anything going running the football. They had no way to run the football. And A&M just came out and just guns ablazing, just consistently dominated. And they had great play from Connor Wegman, who was efficient, did what he had to do throwing the football. Then he was, joined by the run game, and the run game really blew the doors off the Tigers for real.
The other two that didn't hit for you, you had UNLV laying 4.5. That was an awesome game against Syracuse. They ended up losing 44-41. Kyle McCord is a different player at Syracuse. I mean, he is accurate, getting the ball out quickly. I was impressed, really impressed by what I saw from Kyle McCord against UNLV. And then Miami, what a comeback from your guy Cam Ward to end up beating Cal 39-38. Now, they didn't cover the spread, -12, but they still got that critical win on the road at Cal, which was awesome. So, all right, so we're 14-14 now with Emory's bets this year so far on the College Draft podcast. Speaking of drafts, I love me some Labatt Blue Light, whether it's a can, a bottle, or a draft. Drink Labatt Blue Lights while you're watching college football, especially the games you bet on, with friends, and live life to the power of we. Always enjoy responsibly. Beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. All right, Emory, let's start with the big one. It's a top 5 matchup. It is Saturday night. Ohio State, Oregon. It's on NBC. Ohio State is laying 4.5 on the road. Emory, who do you like?
I like Ohio State in this game. I've seen far too much of Oregon to really trust them. They played too many close games. Even as dominant as they were against Michigan State, they allowed Michigan State to hang around. Michigan State just couldn't do anything offensively. That's not going to be the case for Ohio State. And maybe that was a look ahead spot for Oregon. But man, I feel like Ohio State meets them where they're at along the line of scrimmage. We know they can cover, so that kind of neutralizes a little bit what Oregon wants to do throwing the football. Now, they got great play from Jordan James, the running back, who really popped off the screen as a junior in that game against Michigan State. He was outstanding. Someone that was like, man, this guy has good balance, good burst, good agility, checking all these running back boxes, and made it evident that, hey, he's someone that we're going to have to continue to focus on and watch moving forward. That helps balance out their offense. If you worry about Dylan Gabriel, I know he got a little bit banged up in that game, but was able to finish and play well down the stretch. But Ohio State, to me, still has more talent on both sides. I would have, in the preseason, this would have been my Big Ten championship game preview. But you got to like how Penn State is playing. Now you got to talk about Indiana perhaps going on a run. But I do feel like Ohio State can win in this ballgame. But interested to see how Jack Sawyer plays. I've been impressed with how he's played this season so far. And this is another game where a big spotlight game where he could have, a couple of sacks or a game-changing play. and I do like them to win and cover against Oregon.
I know they say, Emory, not to like helmet scout, and sometimes you can get caught in this, but Jack Sawyer does remind me of Sam Hubbard from the Bengals a little bit. They're like same body type. They have the same physical nature, same effort, same where they're good athletes, maybe not elite athletes, but I don't know. When I see Jack Sawyer, I just think a lot of Sam Hubbard, who did some really good things, by the way, for the Bengals yesterday, and they still lost that game. What about another juicy matchup? This one out of the SEC. It's a top 15 matchup. Both teams have one loss. Ole Miss is at LSU, and Ole Miss is laying 3 points, Emory.
Yeah, this one it should be high scoring because I can't trust any defense when these two teams meet up. We saw this play out last year in that high scoring game in Oxford. This one should be another high scoring game as well. And it's gonna feature a lot of offense. So that's why I focused on two offensive players. Antoine Wells, we saw at FCS James Madison before they moved up. But by the time they moved up, he transferred to South Carolina, played really well down there. For whatever reason, still has another year of eligibility. So he uses that to go to Ole Miss. This dude has been it's funny how things kind of tie in together because we talk about freshman receivers. He was one of those guys at FCS James Madison who was standing up and standing out against the FBS competition they played that year and just consistently made great play after great play to where we were saying, oh, he's not going to be at the FCS, too long. You didn't want to talk too much about him because you didn't want to try to, be caught in a RICO case of aiding and abetting of talking him up too much to where FBS teams are going to poach him. Well, he left anyway. But he was one of those freshman standouts that looked like a pro right out of the gate. And he's been like that the entire time he's been in college. So he should have a great game and one that's going to be at least an early day 2 pick, in my opinion, based on, height, weight, speed, ability. And then you look at Garrett Nussmeier. I know everybody talks about Nussmeier and trying to force him into that first round conversation. I'm not there yet. I feel like he still is a little bit reckless with some of his decision making, how he throws the football, where he puts the ball. He takes a lot of sacks, a lot of bad sacks in certain situations. But this is a type of game where it's a rivalry game. We know about the 1959, game and the earthquake game, a Halloween night, Ole Miss LSU. So how he does well here, you talk about, the Burrow game against Ole Miss. You think about the Jayden Daniels game last year against Ole Miss. So this is a game where if Nussmeier can avoid the mistakes and definitely, play up to his the talent that he has around him, this could be a game where he can elevate himself in the eyes of NFL scouts. I'm more interested in the total in this game. Whatever that total is, I'm taking it over because this one is going to be back and forth. I don't want to say it's an elimination game in the SEC, but both teams have a loss already. So, de facto, how the rest of the field is playing, I rather like the over more than anything.
All right, Emory is down for the over 64. He thinks there is going to be a shootout with LSU and Ole Miss over 64. So we need like 35-30. We'll get it done. 35-31, something like that. We'll get it done for Emory. What about Cal coming off that huge game Saturday night where they're playing against Miami and College Game Day was there and all the fanfare. Now they got to go on the road at an undefeated Pitt, and Pitt is laying 4 points at home in this one.
The whole thought about, you can't let the same team beat you twice, or don't let last week's loss count as this week's loss as well. That's what I'm worried about here with Cal, because it wasn't that they lost on like a back and forth affair, last second field goal, heart-wrenching loss. You had a 25-point lead where you dominated defensively, turned the ball over. You were making big plays on both ends of offense in the passing game, run game. and you let it slip away, and you let these guys come back and beat you. And that could carry over facing a team in Pitt that you talked about is undefeated. So when you look at Marcus Harris, defensive back for Cal, and tight end Gavin Bartholomew for Pitt, two legit studs to watch in this ball game, it'll be fascinating to see how Cal responds, especially in the first quarter. And if they are able to get a lead, how they respond on the back end. Because you can see where seeds of the previous week can creep into the heads of these players. Like, all right, man, we got a big lead. Can we do we tense up, or can we finish the drill? I feel like Pitt is playing with house money because of how they are playing. Getting Hammond back in the backfield it was key. They can run the ball. They are balanced. The defense is looking like a Pitt defense. So I'm going to lay these points with Pitt. I think they'll take care of business and continue to push forward this conversation of teams that are not the sexy teams in these Power Four conferences playing like they are and making everybody realize how deep and talented and how much parity there is in college football.
Yeah, I really like Pitt quite a bit in that game. That's a tough spot for Cal. After that Saturday night game, now go across the country. I like some of these. I sit here and I think, wow, why is Miami playing Cal? Why is Cal playing Pitt? Emory, like, you totally forget they're in the same conference now. Like, it's just unbelievable. Like you forget, wow, they're in the same conference. This is a conference game. Speaking of that, by the way, Penn State is laying 4.5 at USC, who has already lost 2 road conference games. They lost at Michigan. They lost at Minnesota. So USC is finding out that the Big Ten, winning on the road in the Big Ten, not real easy. But let's see if Penn State can get it done in the Coliseum. Penn State laying the 4.5, Emory, at USC.
Even though USC has the 2 losses, this is still a big game for Penn State because of the name. And we know folks will focus on Penn State versus USC and not the fact that this is an undefeated, more complete Penn State team versus a 2-loss USC team. Nobody cares about that. It's Penn State versus USC. And we'll get the pageantry drum up and, all the B-roll of, the Rose Bowl and this. So we're going to get all of that, right? But this is still an undefeated Penn State team that's balanced, that's built like a Big Ten team, going up against a USC team that isn't Big Ten built ready. And that's what has plagued them against Michigan and also against Minnesota. And it's going to hurt them in this ball game as well. And Drew Aller has been playing solid football. He still has his ups and downs, but, it's like the stock market. It's ups and downs, but it's still moving in the right direction. And that's where I like Drew Aller to really go out there and compete, because this is another one of these games. We talked about it with Ole Miss and LSU, how this is the game where you can elevate your stock if you Drew Aller. Everybody will be watching. It's a big CBS game, so we know everybody will be tuned in, locked in to see Penn State versus USC, right? So I love Drew Aller in this spot. I love Penn State in this spot. The 2 running backs we talked about a lot. We know about the offensive and defensive lines. Secondary is solid. USC has to prove they can stand, toe-to-toe with these dudes at the point of attack. Haven't seen that yet, so I'm laying the points with Tennessee. But keep an eye on DeCarlos Nicholson, the cornerback for USC, because he's going to get tested. Penn State's aerial attack is where it needs to be this season. So this should be a fun game nonetheless.
Emory laying the points with Penn State, laying the 4.5. I watch a lot of Penn State football. I can tell you a couple of things. Number one, Penn State, I'm sure there's other good tight ends in the country. I don't know if there's going to be a better tight end than Tyler Warren from Penn State. I love absolutely everything about that dude. So watch Penn State's tight end in this game. And Nick Singleton didn't play for Penn State against UCLA on Saturday. He brings just raw athleticism, speed, power. They thought he was going to play. At the last second, he didn't. We'll see what his status appears to be for USC. I would expect him to play, but is he full speed? That's a huge, huge component of it. Check Emory out on social media, on CBS Sports HQ, on the game he calls. He's the man at F-ball game plan. I'm at Ross Tucker NFL. We are at Ross Tucker Pod. The keg is kicked. We are all tapped out.
Thanks for tuning in to College Draft. Make sure to also check out the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Even Money, and Fantasy Feast, all on the DraftKings Network, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.